All right, check. Train. I'm going to try to open this without doing a big pause in the middle of the title. That's what I always do. All right, check. Train to Busan. Okay, so this is a South Korean film. I'm sure many of you have heard of this movie. So basically follows a father who's a little neglectful of his family life. He's very selfish, and during a zombie apocalypse, he has to take his kid to go see his mother. So they board a train, and they take a train to Busan. And on this train, one person gets infected, and it starts spreading like wildfire across the train. And this family, along with many other characters, are trying to survive on this train. The whole movie kind of gave me a Snowpiercer vibe, not only because they occur on trains, but also they use the setting of a train to show division and wealth divide and stuff like social divide. So you'll have like the higher class businessmen are in one part of the train, and you have a little of the bottom feeders on the other side of the train, and they're trying to get into where the upper class is. There's a little of that vibe going on. It's not the predominant focus of the film, unlike Snowpiercer, but nonetheless, it gave me that vibe. I think this is a very enjoyable film. I feel like the way people talk about this movie isn't really adequate to what it is. To me, this is simply a solid, well-crafted, mainstream zombie movie. I don't think it's the artful masterpiece some people claim it to be. You look at another South Korean director like Bong Joon-ho, and what he does within certain subgenres is very genre-bending. So you look at his movie, The Host. The Host really puts a unique spin on giant monster movies. I wouldn't say Train to Busan does that, but instead it aims to be a very solid mainstream zombie movie, and it accomplishes just that. So I don't think the praise is headed in the right direction, but I think the praise is deserved. Starting with the positives of the film, since this movie happens predominantly on a train, it really feels claustrophobic, and I have claustrophobia. I talked about that in the 28 Weeks Later review. Whenever there's stuff happening in a very tight setting, I get antsy, and I'm like, ugh, get out of there. So yeah, I like seeing movies that use stuff like claustrophobia, and I have a wicked fear of heights too. Heights and claustrophobia are like two things in film that really resonate with me, so it was really cool to see it in this movie. The way the zombies act in this movie is really different from how they've acted in previous movies. I feel like they're like contortion artists in this movie. They bend their body in weird ways. They're twitchy. They kind of look like velociraptors. They're just like... Yeah, I will never do that again in my life. Not a velociraptor, that's for sure. I noticed in this movie all the performances are solid, but the one that steals the show here is the child performance. Now, this is not just me being lenient because I know how hard it is to get a child to act. The child in this movie truly steals the show. And like when she cries, there's a part where she's crying, wishing for her daddy, and I'm like, ugh. So all the performances here are really good. Your main lead is solid. Good looking man, by the way. I liked the big tough guy who was along with him for the ride. He kind of reminded me of Russell Crowe for some reason. I think it was just because they like talk the same way and he has the same body type. Good job, Korean Russell Crowe. I liked the character arc, especially of the lead character in this movie. So they make him a very selfish character, and I usually don't like the whole trope of like, oh, he's a selfish person and he has no time for his family, and the kid's like, I hate you, Dad. That's a tired trope to me. I feel like every Eddie Murphy comedy that came out in the 2000s had that premise. It's one that's a little tired to me. And the way they do it in this movie, the way they treat the selfish protagonist is they do it in a very good way. First of all, they have him redeem himself at the end of the movie where he does an ultimate sacrifice. But also throughout the movie, at some point you discover that this zombie outbreak was partially because of him. And it was a very gut-wrenching moment for that character, and it was a bit of his turning point. And there's a lot of little nuances. Early on in the movie, he can hold the door open for someone but chooses to close it instead because of the risk of a zombie slipping through the cracks. The character is put in a similar scenario later on in the movie, but decides to handle it differently. So it wasn't on your nose. It was very well done. It was perfect visual storytelling. Great zombie moments in this movie as well. It's not quite as gory as some of the movies I've been talking about in this series, and that's probably why I feel like this has a more broad mainstream appeal. Don't get me wrong, there is still blood, but it's not as in-your-face as a Romero zombie movie. But there's a scene where the characters are escaping on the train, and zombies are catching up to them and clinging on, and they're piling one on top of the other. The idea of zombies piling one on top of the other is not new. If you look at, say, World War Z, it happens commonly in Hollywood movies. But in World War Z, they do it, and it kind of feels exaggerated. It kind of feels like a big Hollywood blockbuster, zombies piling up. Here it was just the perfect amount of piling up to the point where I was like, oh shit. When I say this movie has mainstream appeal, I feel like the term mainstream has like a negative stigma to it. There is something good with a good mainstream movie, and making a mainstream movie is difficult in itself. You can either make a mainstream movie and do it perfectly and do it well and have a sharp shooting movie, or you can go and try something outrageous and succeed at that as well. The task of making a movie is so difficult in itself that making a mainstream movie doesn't disqualify it from being a good movie. I feel like the term mainstream is just used negatively nowadays. When I say mainstream, I mostly mean that I would feel comfortable showing this movie to someone who's not quite familiar with zombie movies, with someone who didn't watch all the Romero zombie movies. This is a great segue horror movie for those kind of people. If someone came to me and said, hey, I never watched a zombie movie, can you recommend me a zombie movie that does everything a zombie movie should do? I think Train to Busan would be the answer to that question. I think it's a very capable movie. It's really well done. The cinematography I didn't mention, but it's really slick. Even the introduction with the deer, usually deer effects take me out of the movie, CG animals, stuff like that. Here what they have the deer do in the first shot of the movie is pretty interesting. I want to take back the word mainstream and make it a positive word. There's nothing wrong with a mainstream movie. Like, look, it's Halloween. You're gonna have like a Halloween party at some point, or maybe you shouldn't because coronavirus. Do you want to have a movie that's only gonna be cool for like 2 people out of your party? No, you're gonna want to put something where the whole crowd is invested. That's the power of a mainstream movie. For Train to Busan to have that kind of broad appeal, and at the same time not treat the audience like they're idiots. This is a very smart movie. Everything that's set up pays off. Very tight screenplay. A lot of twists and turns. To me, that's an accomplishment. I don't care what anyone says. It's a good mainstream movie. It's not like World War Z where they fucking act like you don't have any sense of logic in your brain. This is a competent movie. So I talk about that mainstream appeal. This is number what in my series? Was it 28, 29, 27? I don't know. Point is, we're getting late in this series, and this is not genre defying. So for me personally, I don't think this is in your higher tier zombie movies. I mean, I would put the Romero trilogy over this movie. Maybe not Night of the Living Dead, but definitely Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. I would put Brain Dead over this movie. I would put maybe Zombie 2 over this movie. I'd put even Poltergeist over this movie. But then again, I don't think, I feel like movies like Poltergeist and Brain Dead would appeal to me and my buddies. I don't think it would appeal to many other people. So this is what I mean by this is a good segue, a good mainstream zombie movie. Some CG in this movie is a little questionable, though. I didn't like the whole train crash sequence. They tried to go for an epic scale, but I don't think the movie quite had the budget for it. I think you could have had it through a character POV kind of shot, or have the camera very close in on the characters as this train crash is happening, just so you can hide and mask some of the visual effects. But the way the film was made, they have like a big wide shot as we see the train crash, and I just didn't buy it. Some of the characters in this are a little too cartoony. I'm talking mostly about the main antagonist, not the zombies. Those are the main antagonists. But there's like a just businessman, and he's supposed to be a bit of a foil for our protagonist. He's supposed to show like this is a greedy businessman as well, and this is what our protagonist can end up being like. But they really make him so over the top that message doesn't really get across. It's to the point where there's even a part where he takes someone, throws them at zombies, and runs away as the zombies are devouring the other person, which is like, okay, he did it, whatever. They were stuck in a situation. But then he fucking does it again like 4 minutes later. I'm like, dude, is this guy just chunking people at zombies? Like, there are other ways to make your antagonist unlikable. It doesn't have to be that. Like, fucking killing 2 people in the span of 4 minutes by throwing them at a herd of zombies to get devoured. It gets the point across. It's a dick character, but I don't know if it's a believable character. So yeah, those are basically the complaints I have with the movie. The jerky character, that train crash sequence which was pretty brief, but also that lack of something that makes this movie very unique. A little of a lack of an identity, something to really make it stick out in the crowd. But that being said, I think this is an excellent movie. I think everyone should go and watch it. It's a good, either date movie, Halloween party movie with people who aren't, your gore hounds or your, basically for people who aren't like me, who just wants to see intestines flying at the walls. It's a good movie for people like that. I know many people in my circle of friends who aren't necessarily movie lovers but love Train to Busan. And for them to appreciate a foreign language film, it's already hard to have your friends who aren't into film to get them to watch a foreign language film. Train to Busan manages to get over that language barrier just by having such great visual storytelling. I feel like you can even watch this movie without the subtitles and understand what's going on. So for those reasons, I feel like this is a great movie. Definitely one of the better movies of this series. Not quite my cup of tea, but I would definitely recommend this movie without a shadow of doubt in my mind.